listening to the Midnight Highway Radio with your host, Shawn, Lonkert. So sit back, take a ride on the Midnight Highway. Where it may take you is not known. Keep an open mind, a mind for the possibility. What if? Now here's your host, Shawn, Lonkert.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Wherever you may be, I am Shawn Lonkert, and you are listening to the Midnight Highway Radio. Raised with strong intuitive abilities, author Annie Waters' everyday life has always included the unseen world of angels, spirits, and lost souls. Annie is very much in tune with the spirit world and hosts haunted tea parties in her spirit-filled Victorian home in Minnesota. Her house has been featured in several television and printed news stories, investigated by teams of ghost hunters, and visited by a number of prominent psychics. When we come back, it's Annie Wilder. We're going to be talking about ghosts here, guys. Oh, what a feeling I have right now as the wind blows hard from outside, as an unseasonable nor'easter blows by. Perfect time for a show like this. You don't want to miss it, guys. We will be right back. right, Annie, I want to go ahead and welcome you to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Shawn. I'm very happy to be on the Midnight Highway Radio.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. A little change of topics here. Going to talk about some ghosts tonight, are we, and haunted houses?
Absolutely.
Now, without giving away too much about your personal experiences and things that you may have seen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I live in Minnesota. I moved into the house that I live in 18 years ago. And my kids and I, before moving here, I did believe in ghosts. It was 1994 when we bought the house. And so the whole paranormal craze had not really hit. It was a different kind of culture then. I mean, there were some true ghost story books, and there were a few classic old books like the Ed and Lorraine Warren had written a book that I checked out from the library when I was a kid, and there was a book called Phone Calls from the Dead, which I just went to the library a few years ago.
That sounds like a good one.
Still in print, and it is. Did you ever read that one?
No, I haven't, but just the title itself.
Yeah, it was great, because that was like in the 80s or 90s when it came out. It might have even been the 70s. So they were way ahead of their time. But anyway, you know, I did believe in ghosts, and I grew up Catholic, so I grew up in a religious belief system where there was a spirit world, and you had allies in the spirit world, and there was a way to have a relationship with the spirit world, and there were rules and etiquettes and things like that. So it wasn't a giant leap for me to believe in ghosts or anything. So here we are. It's 1994. We bought this old Victorian house in a historic town in Minnesota, and I knew there was a ghost in the house when I bought it.
Now, how did you know? What made you think that?
Because I had looked at, with my realtor, I had looked at probably 50 or 60 or even more houses in the preceding year, and most of them were old houses. I wanted an old house. I didn't have a very big budget, so we were looking at a lot of houses that were in poor condition. And of all those old houses that we looked at, there was only one other house that I thought was haunted. And in that house, it was also in an old historic town on the river, the Mississippi River. And that house, when we walked up, it was shaped like the Amityville Horror House. It was a Dutch colonial. It was at the top of a hill. You could only get there by making this pilgrimage up this long staircase. That's one reason why nobody bought it. There was no garage, and you had to walk up, 25, 30, 40 steps to get to the front door.
Oh, yeah,
we're
definitely.
Walking up. Yeah, it was, I sort of loved it. I mean, I was in my 30s at the time, so it's like, oh, this is so cool. So we're walking up the steps, the realtor, my mom, and I, and the porch door, as we approached it, blew open and started banging. And it's like, okay, that's a little bit weird.
Oh, yeah, and this is attracting you to the house, isn't it?
Yeah, and this isn't even the haunted house that I bought. This is just a different house. So it's like, okay, that's weird. Broken spring, or was there a little bit of a breeze up here on the hill or whatever. That was the first thing. Second thing was that I tripped when I walked into the house. And, trip doesn't necessarily mean something's going on, but I pay attention to things, and I pay attention to patterns, and that coming on the heels of the door blowing open in front of us and banging around was like, okay. And then we walked through the house. My mom is also pretty intuitive. Actually, she's way more intuitive than I am. And there was like one or two places in the house that we thought were kind of weird feeling. You just got a sort of creepy feeling. And then we went down into the basement. Nobody lived in this house. And the basement was empty, but somebody had spray painted on a piece of plywood with black spray paint dye. So I was just like, okay, this house is a weird vibe. That was that house. Now, the house that I bought, we walked in. It was a sort of gloomy, damp, cold March day. and very windy. No, I don't know if it's like this in Ohio. Well, you said it was windy tonight.
Actually, it is.
Yeah.
There's a nor'easter blowing up the coast as we speak.
Okay, well, perfect setting for telling ghost stories.
It is.
So it was this, cold, damp, sort of dark day. Pull up in front of this Victorian house, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much cooler than anything that we have looked at so far. It's so much bigger. I mean, it wasn't in perfect shape, but it was structurally sound, and that was really important. And then the realtor said, it says we're supposed to go in the back door. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. You'd think they'd want us to come in the front, for a grand entrance. And we walked around to the back. The house had been a single-family home when it was built in the 1870s or 1880s. A grand house on a grand street. It was called the Silk Stocking District. And over the years, its fortunes had changed. In the 1930s, the house was turned into an upper-lower duplex. And then in the 1960s, the people who lived here turned the downstairs into two different apartments, so it was a triplex when I looked at it.
Okay.
So we came in the back door, and the back apartment was where the old man had lived, who lived here before I bought it, and he had died the previous year. And we came into what was his kitchen, and it felt like as soon as we stepped in the house, it felt like we had stepped back in time, I don't know, to the 1940s. Old red linoleum kitchen countertops, homemade cupboards, a stove like from the 1940s. It was as big as a Cadillac, a rusty old refrigerator, and that in itself was kind of odd, but the house was so still and so heavy, and what I felt like was somebody was right behind me. And I looked at my realtor. By this time, we sort of knew each other because we had spent so much time together. I'm like, do you know if the old man died in the house? And he said, do you want me to check on that? And I said, yeah, that would be good. And he felt it too. It wasn't just because it was an old house. There was something. You felt like you were being watched.
Oh, I know the feeling. Believe me.
Okay, so we walked through the house, and the old man who lived here before us was named Leon, an old German Catholic guy, and he was a carpenter, and he was very skilled at what he did. And so the house, like the pipes and the construction and things like that were all in good repair. As far as decorating, cheerfulness, or things like that, not so much. I mean, it had a very dark, gloomy vibe. And so we walked through the house, weird twists and turns in the house. I do describe it in my book, and I've got a floor plan, but, a staircase that went to nowhere, and a room with 7 doors, and one of them, you open the door, and there's another door on the other side.
Wow,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I know there's a ghost, but this house is so cool. And my kids were teenagers. I'm like, okay, we could move into the house in this condition and just slowly, over time, turn it into a great, groovy place. I've got the rest of my life to fix it up. I totally think I want this house, but I want to make sure that I don't have any nightmares or anything about it once I leave. And so we walked through the house, and the farther away we got from Leon's apartment, the lighter the house felt. And so I'm like, okay, I think there's a ghost, and I think he lives in the back apartment. But I want that house. And the ghost, I mean, to me, what it felt like was not demon clown or, some menacing thing. It felt like a sort of heavy, gloomy presence. And we did find out that his wife was still alive and living in a nursing home and not in very good health. And I thought, maybe he's just waiting around until her time on Earth is done, and then they will go to the light together. So I'm like, okay, I'm not afraid. I can deal with heavy, gloomy energy. We can make this house cheerful and light and positive, and still be respectful of, you know, the man who lived here before us, because he had good core values. He just had a little different take on things in his house than I do, and whatever. So, bought the house. And about a week or so after moving in, I woke up in the middle of the night. And one thing that happened as soon as we moved in, I started waking up at weird times in the night. And at my old house, I never woke up. I slept like a bear. I loved sleep. But I would wake up at 1:11 or 2:22 or 3:33, and I thought that was super weird.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Amityville 3:15.
Okay, is that the time that the guy killed his family?
I believe that's what it was, yes.
Okay. I did read that book, but I think it was in the 70s when I read it. But yeah, so I woke up, it was 1:11, I could hear a woman talking, and it was this, you've heard ghost voices, because I know you've done
yes.
EVP recordings. Okay. Have you also heard ghost voices just without any electronic equipment, but just heard them?
I believe I have, but there's no way I can confirm so.
Okay. Well, my experience with ghost voices is that they have this sort of hollow, metallic quality. Have you had that experience?
Just pretty much the EVPs. What I heard actually called me, I can't even say it because people are going to be listening, but I was actually 12 years old when I lived in a house, and I was taking a bath, and, I mean, forgive my French, but it said bastard. That's what it called me. And, yeah, and it was a guy's voice, and it just, you know, it almost sounded like my dad, which I knew it. I mean, it didn't sound like my dad, but I'm saying like the tone of the voice.
Okay.
And that pretty much, that's all I've ever heard with, you know, the naked ear.
Okay. Well, when I have heard, people have recorded EVPs in my house, and weirdly, they actually sound more normal than these voices that we have heard just because you're hearing voices here. But the voice that we heard that night had this very metallic, hollow, almost robotic quality to it. And the other thing that was weird, besides the fact that it was a woman and the old guy that lived here that I thought was the spirit in the house, and I was like, is there more than one spirit in the house? And that it was upstairs. And the presence that we felt here was in the back apartment. And the way me and my kids dealt with that without really consciously talking about it, it was sort of like, okay, well, the ghost, which is how we referred to him in those days, now we call him by name, but it's like, the ghost can have the back part of the house. You know, it's just like a room that we don't use that much, and then the summer kitchen, which we just walk through to get to the rest of the house. Like, the ghost can have the back part of the house, and we'll have the rest of the house. But here it was upstairs. It's like, wait a minute, there's not supposed to be a ghost up here, and there's not supposed to be a woman ghost in the house. So her voice, what I was hearing sounded like one side of a conversation, because there were normal pauses and, you know, startups again and stuff like that. I could not quite make out what she was saying.
Right.
It wasn't completely, you know, schmucked up like the Charlie Brown teacher voice, but there was just an element, it was just not quite decipherable. And the other thing that was odd about it is that it sounded like it was being a recording that was being played at high volume. In other words, it didn't sound like she was shouting, but it was, you know, because when you shout, it changes the way that you express your voice, your cadence or something.
Right, like it was amplified or something.
Yeah, it was just amplified. It was a normal conversational kind of talking, but really, really loud. And when we've had bangs and crashes and things like that we've heard in the house, they are also unnaturally loud. So, gosh, I'm getting probably way off track from your original question.
No, it's actually really interesting, though.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that was the first night. Okay, so I hear this, and I was listening to it. All these mixed feelings. I mean, partly like I'm super scared, and partly why am I hearing a woman's voice and not the old man? You know, there's more than one ghost here, and partly a little tiny bit of me was like, I knew this house was haunted. I knew it. And then the voice stopped. But it didn't feel like a good feeling because it felt like something else was going to happen, and it did. And what happened was this tremendously loud crashing, pounding in the walls of my room. And we had only been there like a week or two, and I'm like, I just was like, okay, could this possibly be like the furnace or the radiators or something like that? Because I had never lived in a house with radiators. And then I'm like, I don't even know if the furnace is on. You know, it was mid-April when we moved in. And I listened to this pounding. And I was scared because it was so loud that it seemed like it was angry. Something was, whatever was making the pounding seemed angry. And after 11 minutes of this, I'm like, I've got to get up and grab my kids and get out of the house. And I'm like, okay, sat up in bed, just trying to steel myself to run out of my room. And as soon as I sat up, the pounding stopped.
You see, I remember when I was little and something like that would take place, because this banging that you're describing is really eerily familiar to my personal experiences that I've actually gone through. And were you just having that experience, like when you're laying there in bed and you're hearing that banging, in your mind you're probably thinking, I don't want to get up, because if I get up, something's going to notice me, and
exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
So it's like it's pretty spooky stuff.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's almost like you're drawing attention to yourself if you move or do anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and the lights were off. I mean, I couldn't see anything. I didn't know what was going on. So, what did you do in your case? Did you get up and run out of your room?
I played possum. To be honest with you, I laid there as still and as quiet as possible, hoping that whatever it was would think that I was sleeping.
Right, that's good. Well, I ended up, as soon as I sat up and the everything stopped, I was relieved for like a second until I realized it knows what I'm doing. I mean, it's watching me, or whatever this is has some like conscious awareness. It's not just like some random noise, because it stopped because I sat up.
Yep. Do you think it was doing that to get you up?
I think it was doing that to get my attention and to give me a message. And the message, I don't know if some people, I try to not give away every detail in case people want to read the book, but basically I will say that the old man, Leon, had unfinished business, and he had buried some stuff in the basement in the dirt room, which we found shortly after this night. And it was really clear to me, I like to think I would have done this anyway, but it's like, this needs to go back to his family, all this important stuff, and then he will be happy and he can move on, and we can live in peace in our beautiful house that we love. So it did seem like a message. I feel it was a message from Leon letting me know that he was around, and that there was something urgent, and it wasn't like a direct threat, but there was a lot of energy. It's like, okay.
And you said this was back in the 80s, right?
This was 1994.
94, excuse me. And you even said that that's before, it was a really hot topic, the paranormal. When did you first start hearing about EVP?
I think the first time I heard about EVPs were, I'm just sort of, I don't have a distinct memory, but I did have like a paranormal investigation group come here in, I believe it was 2005, and they did some recordings. Now, I probably had heard of it before that. I actually used to work at Llewellyn Publishing, so I was a copywriter there, and I got to read so many interesting manuscripts. That was a part of my job that I loved. But I think that Llewellyn had a book called Speaking with the Dead, or something like that talked about EVPs. But I would say, it was after the year 2000.
There's a lot of weird, eerie connections here we got. We're talking about bangings. Then you bring up possibly 2005 being the first time that you heard of EVP, which is the year that I first did my first EVP session, was 2000.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, 2005, Ghost Hunters, the show was just getting on there. Everybody wanted to go out and get their digital recorders and see what they could find. So that's pretty interesting.
That is interesting. We'll have to see. Well, actually, when I saw your website, I thought Midnight Highway. I totally love that name. I've got a book coming out this August called Trucker Ghost Stories, and that whole vibe, it's like the late road, desolate, night, the whole kind of out in the middle of nowhere, all by yourself.
You want to know why I come up with that name?
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. I was 10 years old, and I would be sitting out there with my Uncle Jack, my dad, and of course my sister. They'd be drinking their beers, and I'd be drinking my pop. And there was a song, he would always hear country music, and there was a song by Southern Pacific called The Midnight Highway. And I've always been fascinated with, ghosts and aliens and stuff like that. And it was just so weird that I would always hear that song, and then we'd be driving home late down the Midnight Highway, and maybe the song would come on again, and you're just driving down that old dark road, and you just start thinking, what's out there? And it was like
exactly
2007. I said, I got to come up with a name for this, and that's pretty much where it stems from.
That's really cool. I'll have to check out that song.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to play
I've heard it.
It'll be playing at the end of our show tonight. So when I send you the MP3 file, it'll be all there for you.
Okay, that's cool. So, I was going to say, 1994, the culture was so different at that time, because people have said, like, did you want to buy a haunted house? It's like, no, I wanted to buy this house, and I was willing to buy it, even though there was a ghost in it. But in 1994, we moved in. I didn't let my kids, and I did not take any pictures when we first moved in of the inside of the house, because I didn't want to see the ghost. I didn't want him to show up in a picture. I didn't want to deal with it. I was just like, we're going to live here peacefully. I'm sure we can coexist. I'm sure he'll probably move on once his wife has moved on. And so, it was a whole different thing. Like, no, I didn't buy a house to have a haunted house. I bought this house to have a great, cool, old Victorian house. So now, in retrospect, I do like living in a haunted house, at least in this haunted house. But that wasn't anywhere in my mind when I moved in here.
Do you think that somehow you were meant to buy this house?
Well, weirdly, I do. I had made offers on 3 different houses in the year leading up to buying this house. And each deal was like a sure thing. Everything was ready to go. In fact, the third one was about 2 or 3 weeks before I bought this house. I had to move out. I had already sold my house, and I had made an offer on a house that had just gone on the market. I came in, I looked at it, I offered them what they were asking. It had only been on the market for a day or two. And I asked if they would leave the porch swing. And because I did that, they were able to refuse my offer because somebody came in the same day offering them more than they were asking for their house. And if I hadn't asked for their porch swing, then I would have, as I understand it anyway, I would have, legally they wouldn't have been able to turn me down for a higher offer. But because I had left negotiations open by asking for something else, they could say, no, we don't want to do that, and then accept the higher offer. So now I am sitting with 2 teenagers, 3 weeks till I have to move out of my house, and no house. And my realtor called me. He's like, this is really weird, but this house just came on the market that sounds like exactly what you're looking for. Excuse me. And I said, okay. He said, there's probably going to be something wrong with it. For how they're describing it, they're not asking very much money. And I'm like, okay. We came and looked at it. As it turned out, it had been on the market for 6 months already, but it wasn't on this main listing that goes out all throughout the Twin Cities. It had been listed just like with a local realtor and not available in the larger MLS system. But anyway, so we came and looked at it. We looked in March. Leon had passed away the previous August. So I think the house went on the market in like September or maybe October. But when we came in, the realtor and I, on this old red linoleum countertop were the business cards of probably, stacks of business cards, maybe 50 or 60 realtor business cards, because every time they came in, they had to leave their card on the counter.
Oh, wow.
Pardon my coughing here. So I looked and I'm like, these are all the people who looked at the house before me and didn't want it. But when I made my offer, my realtor, so I made the offer. The offer was accepted. We went to the signing, and Leon's daughter was there, and she lives in a different state. And she was sitting across the table. I had not met her before this moment. And she said, the house chose you.
What did you think when you heard that?
I got like this tiny, it was very intriguing. And, I thought that sounds so cool, because I already was sort of falling in love with this house. I had lots of dreams for it. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, the house was on the market for 6 months with no offers. And then she said, I got 3 within a couple of days. And she said, yours was one of them. Excuse me a sec. Oh, sorry. I'm afraid I'm getting a sore throat.
Oh, it's all right. Actually, right now I'm suffering through a tooth infection.
Oh no!
So I actually had I had a tea bag in my mouth before this show started.
Oh no! Okay, well.
So don't feel bad.
Okay, we'll power through here.
We'll power through it.
But she said, so the house chose you. And I said, oh, what do you mean by that? And she said, that there were 3, no offers for 6 months, then 3 people made an offer within a couple of days. Yours was not the highest. But she said, I asked my dad, Spirit, which offer to accept, and the message I got was that I should accept yours. So that made me feel super positive and just, this is so cool. I kept waiting for a cool house. I mean, I had so many people tell me, with your budget, you can't really afford an old house, or it'll be a wreck, and you should be looking at newer houses and smaller houses. And I had this real dream of having an old house with an open staircase and porches and an attic and hardwood floors, and that's what I got. And I always tell people, keep on believing that you can get what you want, because it happens. It has happened to me in my life a lot of times. So anyway, so when we moved in, even with the ghost in the back, I met his daughter. She's a nice person, a decent person, and he probably won't be there forever. And the house chose me. That's what she said. So we're golden. And then I woke up and heard the voice and the pounding, and I was like, wait, no. this doesn't feel like I'm the chosen one. I feel like and sort of annoyed with me. At least she was ever doing the banging.
What was her demeanor like? I mean, what did she look like when she was telling you this? Did she look happy? Did she have a stern look?
Just very straightforward, and and like she was aware that my reaction might be, like, what? Or what are you talking about? But no, just very straightforward. I was wearing an old sweatshirt to the clothing that I had been wearing while we were moving, but I couldn't find my outfit for the clothing because somebody packed it. It was somewhere in a moving truck. But so I was wearing this old sweatshirt that said "out of body, back in 5 minutes." So she might have thought that she had an audience that would be sympathetic. But yeah, so you had asked me earlier if we have seen spirits in this house over this many years, and I always say, we also have all of our regular life too: pay taxes, cut the grass, do laundry, have parties, whatever. But yes, in this house, we have seen spirits of people who live here. Some, I saw Leon. He looked like a physical person. He looked like a real guy, sort of stooped a little bit, walking like he was in pain, heavy, and completely just looked like a real person. We've also seen 2 old-fashioned spirit girls who have, through research, we've learned lived here in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and every time I've seen them, they look like more traditional ghosts, transparent, all white, and floating above the ground.
Now, why do you think there's a difference in visual there between the 3 different entities?
Well, I think that with Leon, he had not been in the spirit world very long when I saw him, and he had only been in spirit for 6 months. And I heard from a psychic at a bookstore that if spirits have not yet crossed over, if they are earthbound, and I don't believe that every spirit that visits people is earthbound. I think spirits can come and go. I think they can visit. I think they can come and help out. I think they can just drop by. But I think there are some spirits who are earthbound who don't know yet that they can leave, or they're afraid to leave. And those spirits, I do believe, if they would like help, it's a good thing to help them. And at that point, I'm inclined to think that Leon was earthbound because he was very concerned about this stuff that was hidden in the basement that needed to get to his family. So this psychic at the bookstore said, if a spirit is earthbound, they will appear as they did in their physical life at the time of, their passing. So if they were 65 when they died, that's what they're going to look like. And she said spirits that have already crossed over and know that they can come and go and are stopping back for a visit or something like that, they can appear as they were at their most vibrant and healthy. They can appear at any age. They can appear however they want to, and they may appear like the Spirit Sisters. My take on that, because when I saw them, they had pompadour hairdos, long white dresses, and they looked like girls from the 1800s or early 1900s. And then when I was doing more research on my house, I found out that 2 of these 3 sisters one had actually died in the 1920s or 30s, but the other 2 had lived to be old women and had died in the 1970s or possibly even 80s. And when I realized that, because I had this notion of them as the sort of romantic figures lost in time, the old-fashioned ghost girls. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, why didn't I see them as 70-year-old women in grandma wear, I saw them as
really
young women in this, beautiful dresses. Sorry about that. And
that's all right. How old did they appear? I mean, are we talking teenagers,
I would
20-year-olds?
say, teenagers. Yeah, teenagers.
Okay.
Like 17, 18. And when we found a picture of one of the girls from this family, we only found a picture of one. And I thought we'd have a better shot at finding pictures of them because the well-to-do people tended to have more pictures of their family, and pictures of their house and things like that. But we only found a picture of one of the sisters. It's the graduating class of 1907 from my town. All of the girls are wearing white blouses and white skirts, and their hair is up in pompadour hairdos. The boys are wearing white. Actually, I can't remember what the boys are wearing. I've got the picture upstairs, and it's actually in one of my books too. But
I was just going to ask you that. What book is that in, where people can check that out?
Spirits Out of Time, which is my second book, has a picture of the Spirit Sisters in it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the picture right now. So the boys were wearing suits, dark suits.
Okay, I believe that's the book that you sent me, right?
Pardon me?
I believe that's the book that you... Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yep. So that's in the back, and it's actually on page 221, I think. Yeah, 221. So my theory, and this is part of the fun of living in a haunted house, it's like a puzzle that never ends, or a Scooby-Doo episode that never ends. My theory is that these girls appeared in their... in that manner because that's what they looked like when they lived here, for one thing. That's also an image that I was able to verify as much as you can verify these things, who they were, by their appearance. And what was the third one? Maybe that's it. But that manner of dress, and this is the picture, the only picture that I could find of any of these girls.
I'm actually looking at the photo right now in your book.
Yeah, and we didn't find this photo until about 10 years after the first time we saw two sisters. I saw two of the sisters one night, and on two other occasions I just saw one sister by herself. And with these spirit sisters, they don't seem evil or threatening at all, but they are not overly friendly. It's more like they're aware, they're looking at me whenever I see them. Once one of them said something to me, but it's not like they're here to be my friend or they're not here to establish a relationship, but on the other hand, they're not hostile. It's almost like just at certain moments, their spirit world and my physical world collide, or they're in the physical world. I'm not quite sure how it works because I think my house... Oh, gosh, I'm glad this isn't a live interview with this darn cough.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right.
Okay. But my house has, I believe, now I've been here a long time, I think about this a lot, but there's an astral version of my house. And maybe there's an astral version of everything, just like each of us has our, I believe, our physical body and our spirit body. Maybe structures or trees, plants, when you're talking about a house, this is a physical, it exists in the physical world. And yet, in the case of my house, for 130 or 140 years, families have lived here. There's a lot of energy that has built up in this house, and I believe that I think there's an astral counterpart to my physical house, and I have dreamt about it a lot.
Now, when you see these... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
When you see these apparitions, these ghost girls, what is the scene like? I mean, are we talking a classic night scene, or do you see them in broad daylight, or is it all over the time?
With the ghost girls, I have only seen them at night. The first time was, all right, the book that you have on your website, the red book, is my first book, and that's the one with the red cover. That is a book about my house. The second book has a blue cover, and that's a book of family ghost stories. But so this book with the red cover, there's a girl, like an old-fashioned looking girl on the cover. That's a photograph of an antique seed poster that is on a door that was down in the dirt room in my basement. And the door itself is haunted. And the door now, and for the last 18 years, has actually been up in my parlor on display. And the reason I put it on display is because it's a homemade door. It's a work of art, in my opinion. It's super cool, and I did not really think, I was a little freaked out by the door when I discovered it, because you don't expect when you're in a dirt room, which is filled with dirt and like gardening implements, an old rain gutter and windows and stuff like that, like garden shed kind of stuff. You don't expect to see a little face, and that's what we saw when my son and I were down in the dirt room looking for treasure. And so I'm like, after screaming when I saw this door, because it was so, it was hanging upside down, so this little old-fashioned girl face, was upside down. And I just thought, I screamed, okay. And I'm like, all right, it's a poster. But you know what? I don't even like a poster of a little girl in a dirt room. It just seems too crime scene or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna go get a screwdriver. We're gonna take this door off its hinges and put it out in the garage. Well, we took the door off its hinges and brought it upstairs. And when I looked at it in the light, I'm like, gosh, this door is homemade and it's gorgeous. It's got like a brown porcelain door handle and this old antique seed poster. And so we left it in the living room the first night. And I was a little bit afraid of it because I thought if there's anything connected to this door, we probably stirred it up. And I left the door in the living room. We went upstairs, went to bed. I woke up that night. I don't know, are you familiar with out-of-body experiences?
Yeah, actually. I've never personally had one, of course, but yes, I'm very familiar.
All right. Well, if you're ever in Minnesota, you and your wife, one of the most common experiences that people have when they spend the night here is, I think, is an astral experience, an out-of-body experience. They wake up and they can't tell if they're awake or asleep. They wake up and they see someone standing inside their bed.
I've had something like that before. What is that?
Well, I think there are many different forms of astral experiences, but an out-of-body experience is where you physically have the sensation of leaving your body, or that you're out of your body and you're either looking at yourself from a vantage point that you shouldn't have, or that you can travel around, different places, flying, basically.
I'll tell you what, we're going to have to set something up and come up to your house one of these days.
Well, that's cool, yeah, because that's the most common experience that people have when they spend the night, whether or not they believe in ghosts. But anyway, getting back to the story, so we had the door in the living room. I was going to wait till the next day, make a decision about, do we just put it in the garage, or do we keep it in the house? I woke up in the middle of the night. That night, I felt myself floating out of my body. I had one possible astral experience before I moved here, and I think I was like 33 or 32 when I moved here. So, but I knew immediately what was happening. I felt as though I was floating, and I was floating up to the ceiling of my bedroom. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I lifted my hands up because I was going to the ceiling, and I'm like, am I going to go through, or am I going to bump? And my hands felt like they were going through, but it felt like a thicker, kind of almost like a gel or something when my hands were going through the ceiling. So then I'm like, all right, I know what's happening. I'm having an out-of-body experience. I want to find more treasure in this house because what we found in the basement that belonged to Leon's family was treasure. And I immediately found myself in the sort of like a little sitting room outside of one of the bedrooms upstairs. And I thought, oh, this is so cool. I'm up in the air. I'm up above like a double doorway. And I was looking at the plaster, and I thought, you know, do I believe this experience enough that I'm willing to drill through plaster in a house, or is there some way I can get to what I'm looking at through the attic floor? And while I'm thinking this way, I feel like I'm being watched. And I turn around, and because I was in the air, or my consciousness, or whatever astral travel actually is, was in the air. The vantage point was from, you know, up above this doorway. I turn around, and there are these two spirit girls floating in the air watching me. And they looked like they were annoyed with me. And one of them leaned to the other one and went like she was whispering something about me. And I was so terrified. I just was like, whoa! It was just hot, you know, with fear. And immediately I was sitting up in my bed. And I'm like, that just happened. I know that just happened. And I ran out of my room and I went to that doorway because in my astral experience, there were these curlicue pieces of trim at the top of the door. And, you know, in that top piece that goes across the doorway. And when I ran out there, it didn't have the curlicue pieces of trim. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Now later, this again, we had only been in the house for a month or two. And this house, if you ever come here, it's got like a million different, cool little keyholes, and there's just a million different little sort of fun things to discover. But I realized after I'd been here longer that curlicue trim that I'd seen in this experience actually is in the playroom in my house. And I have no way of proving this. This is just a possibility. But this house was added on to, and changes were made. We do know that because we've looked at fire insurance maps from different decades. And usually the back of a house where you didn't entertain had the most plain trim and, you know, simple stuff, because the front of the house was fixed up because that's where you entertained guests. And so the back part of my house has very simple trim, but the playroom, which is in the back of the upstairs, and at one time was just a landing before you got to the attic. You could come up the main staircase, and then you'd be in this little landing room, and then you'd keep go up to the attic. That has this fancy trim. So I'm wondering if the trim got moved, you know, when they added on a different room or something like that. I don't know. I don't have a for sure answer. But this is part of the fun of living in this house, you know, thinking about these things.
How many rooms are in your house?
Oh, let's see. Well, there are 3 bedrooms upstairs plus a sitting room plus a bathroom. And there are, let's see, there's a parlor, a kitchen, a living room, a summer kitchen, and then a den on the main floor, plus 2 bathrooms. And then there's a full attic, and there's a flat roof that you can go out this little tiny door at the top of the stairs and be on the roof. 4 porches. It sounds like I'm bragging. I'm not. I got this house for a little tiny bit of nothing, or I would never have been able to get it. But yeah, I just love this great, crazy, groovy old house. Lots of rooms.
What do your kids think about this? Let's go back to when it began. When it all began. What did they have any frightening experiences?
They did, but not too bad. Actually, well, my kids were teenagers when I moved in, and that also helped me feel like it was okay to move in, because, you know, if I would have had 2 infants or 2 toddlers, I would have been more worried. But
right.
Teenagers can speak up, and my kids at that time, my daughter was a blue-haired, like punk metal rocker.
Okay.
Yeah, my son was in an Elvis obsession phase of his life where he dressed like Elvis, he talked like Elvis, he sang like Elvis. He didn't come out of Elvis mode for like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, and he played the piano all the time and stuff, and also like Jerry Lee Lewis piano songs. And I'm like, you know, if anything, these kids will probably drive the ghost up to the light. You know? So I wasn't worried about them.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, and what happened, I guess my son Jack's experience that he had here was not all that scary. He was in the downstairs back bedroom for a while, and when we had, you know, kids going to college and kids moving here and moving there, we moved bedrooms around, and I rented out a back room for a while, and, you know, so everybody's had a variety of different bedrooms in the house. Excuse me, but at one point, he was in the back bedroom, and my daughter and I flew to California for a family wedding, and when I came back, he said, the ghost was in your room while you were gone.
Ooh.
My room was right above his room, and I said, yeah, so that's sort of creepy.
Yeah.
Say that. he goes, well, because I could hear him walking around up there. And I said, well, I wonder why he would be in my room when I'm not there. And he said, my son worked in the pizza business at the time, so he would get home at like 2 in the morning or whatever, and then watch TV for an hour in his room and then go to sleep. And he said, oh, he walks around your room every night at that time. I just thought it was you.
Oh.
So I was like, that's okay. So that was his experience. His other experience here that was ghostly was coming to the back door one night, again at, 2 or 3 in the morning, and hearing a man whistling in the summer kitchen. And I said, how do you know it was a man? He's like, I don't know, but I felt like there was a man in the kitchen whistling, and he thought it was my husband. And so he turned the lock and opened the door, expecting, to see Levi standing there, and it was a dark room. The house was silent. We were upstairs in bed. So those were his experiences. And my daughter is actually pretty psychic, and she's had more experiences, but the spookiest one that she had was actually a dream. And yet I believe that a dream can be just a dream, processing, what you experienced that day or what you felt or things you're worried about or things you're hoping for. I believe that dreams can bring messages from the spirit world. I believe dreams can give you messages from your own subconscious. And I also believe that spirits of loved ones or spirits of people you never knew or other kinds of astral beings can enter your dreams or affect you through your dreams. And in this case, I think there was something going on in the house that night because I was in the downstairs back bedroom in those days, and I had a nightmare that woke me up shouting. I was ordering this gigantic being to stop this. My nightmare was that this gigantic, some sort of entity had come and opened the door and picked up one of our family members and was like rushing off down the street with them. So I woke up shouting for them to stop. My daughter was 16, and I called her warrior princess, super fierce, super self-possessed. I mean, she was born self-possessed. Never slept with her dad and I when she was a little kid. But she was 16. She came, and the same night came to my room and said, I just had a really bad nightmare. Can I sleep in your bed with you? For her to say that was like, I can't.
Don't even say she had a dream and she was getting carried off by something.
Well, no, that would have been weird. Her dream was weird, I think.
No, I was about to say.
Here's the thing. No, her dream was that she woke up, and she is super psychic. She's more like my mom. She's very psychic. But she woke up in her dream, and she knew there was an evil entity in the house. And so she was trying to wake everyone up in her dream, and nobody would wake up. It was like everybody was under a spell. And so she ran to the phone, and she tried to call 911, and the phone would only dial 666. And so then she's like, I've got to run out of the house and get help. You know, she didn't want to leave everybody here with that thing, but she thought that was the only way to, save everyone. And so she was at the top of the staircase, and we have a staircase where there's a landing at the top, and then there's a bunch of steps, and then there's a landing, and then there's 2 steps that curve and come down into the main hall, the front hall. And she said she got to the top of the steps, and she saw the entity, and it was like a young woman ghost with a shaved head. And Molly was like, I got to run past her, or we're doomed. You know, I got to try to get by her. And as Molly started running down the steps, this entity started walking up the steps backwards. And Molly ran past, and as she ran past, and Molly has long hair, this entity lifted up her hair and blew icy cold air breath into the back of her neck. Okay, so super spooky. That's bad enough. Well, years later, again, because this is like 1994, I'm reading a book by an energy healer who's pretty well known. Her name is Cindy Dale, and her area of expertise is the chakras. Are you familiar with the chakras?
No, I'm not actually.
Oh, okay. Well, they are like energetic points that correspond with the physical body. Human bodies have 7 main chakras, and one is at the top of the head, and one is in the center of the forehead, and one is in the throat, one is in the heart, so on, all the way down to your base chakra. But, so years after Molly's bad dream, I'm reading Cindy Dale's book about chakras, and the chakra has, imagine them being shaped like a funnel with the wide end out. So you've got, where your throat chakra is, for example, a funnel with the narrow end pointed towards your neck, and then on the back of your neck, the same thing, wide end out, and the narrow end pointed towards your neck. So it's like, almost like a vortex of energy coming into your body. And what Cindy Dale said was, if spirits want to enter the human energy field, they come in through the back of the throat chakra. And that's where this spirit blew her icy breath in Molly's neck in the dream. And Molly had never even heard of chakras. So that was pretty spooky.
Annie, what's the difference between a demon and a ghost? Somebody that's died and a fallen angel, if you believe in that.
Well, I do believe that there are astral beings that are destructive, and I think they could be called by a variety of names and still be the same thing. I don't, as far as I know, I'm knocking on wood because this house is a house filled with portals, and I work really hard to keep the energy here positive and to keep this house feeling like a positive, light-filled place, because I think that is a way to attract positive spirits and positive people, and it's not comfortable for negative spirits. I mean, that's a way to protect a place from negativity, is to keep it so positive that anything negative doesn't want to be there. So I don't dwell on thinking about that kind of stuff very much, but I think that there are spirits who were in a human body who did a lot of harm in their lives, who could be harmful as spirits as well. And I believe there are also astral beings that were never in a human body that can be harmful and destructive. And that's, I guess, what I would characterize as a demon.
Now, I could go on and on forever with you. I could tell right now. I mean, I've got so many questions for you. Believe it or not, we are an hour and 5 minutes into the show. And, yeah, it was only scheduled for an hour. But quickly, I do want to get to some of the Facebook questions, and then I want you to put your website out there and let people know where they can get this stuff. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. I just got the book, and I looked on the back of it, and you're talking about a faceless ghost haunting your mother for decades. That right there, that stood out to me. But let's go to...
I'm going to send you a copy of that book about my house, too.
Oh, that would be wonderful. There was a Jennifer from Orlando, and she said, do you believe in loved ones can actually stick around and look after us after we have passed? But you pretty much answered that by saying yes in dreams, and you believe that, right?
I do, and I think it's a good question. I like to hear that question because I'm always hoping that people, to me, I do believe it, and I think it's a hopeful and a comforting thing to know. I believe, I had a sit-down visit from my great-grandma spirit, and my grandma, who was one of my favorite people in the whole world, I just absolutely adored her. She has come through. I have felt her give me a hug. I actually saw her for a second when I was in need of some comforting, and so I do believe that. I do believe that our loved ones in spirit can often come by, can help us by giving positive energy or by helping us think of an idea, or just lots of ways that they can actually provide practical assistance to those of us still in physical bodies.
There's another eerie similarity here that's going on that just crossed my mind. You're talking 1994 when you guys moved into that house, and you were mentioning March of 94, the 19th actually. That's when my grandmother passed away. And the crazy part is, I know you've seen the movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the final movies I ever watched with her. And she said, and I said, Grandma, whenever you pass, would you be able to give us a sign, but just don't scare us? And she was like, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll give you a good sign. Well, right after she died, and I come home from school, broad daylight, sunny day, nice and bright in the room. My light actually first, I'm turning on the radio, I'm listening to it, and that song, what is it, that ghost song, what was it, Unchained Melody, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that was the one from the movie, right?
Yes. It came on 3 different stations simultaneously, and then I'm like, I said out loud, Grandma, is that you? And my light went on, and it turned off, and I'll never forget that to this day.
Yes, that is super, super cool.
Yep,
love that kind of story. I do think that the more people share their stories like that, the better our world would be, because people would not be so completely devastated and heartbroken. I mean, it's still super hard to lose someone, but
if that was her too, if it was her, it was on a nice spring afternoon, broad daylight, at a time that I wouldn't be scared. And I later had dreams, too, which was so weird. Like, it would be me and my family, and we'd all be in a single line, and my grandma was at the end of the line, and each of us individually advanced towards her and would give her a hug and then move on. And then it came up to me, and I gave her a hug and moved on. It was so weird, like maybe that was real in a way.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I totally believe in that. I think that the more we pay attention to our dreams, like the healthier we would be, and accept that you can get messages and have some connection with your loved ones in spirit through dreams. Yeah, I love that.
And I'm only going to be able to get to a couple more of these. I know there's a lot of people on Facebook that got questions. I really try to get to them. Michael from Denver here says, what's the difference between a ghost and a poltergeist? That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, my understanding, there are a couple of different theories on what poltergeists are, and one of the best poltergeist books I've ever read, if you like super spooky stuff, I'm going to look it up right now if I can do this while I'm...
Oh, of course, yes.
Okay, so poltergeists some people feel that they are human energy that is projected outward, like from teenagers and troubled, especially teenagers, but like where you have this excess energy that's just bouncing off walls and doing all sorts of crazy things. And I think that I like that idea, but if that were the case, I think there would also be like poltergeists associated with women who are in their 40s and 50s and going through a ton of hormonal stuff too, and usually it's more associated with like teenage kids and especially girls. So the other theory is that they're actually a form of spirit, and I tend to believe that because there are, from what I've read, there are certain characteristics that are certain events that occur when a poltergeist is around. And poltergeist means noisy ghost. And one of the characteristics of poltergeist is the knockings and rappings and things like that. Okay, a lot of spirits do that, but with poltergeist there tends to be more destructive behavior, like things being thrown and heavy furniture being moved or pushed over. One thing that I just learned reading this book, and by the way, my favorite poltergeist book ever, is Poltergeist, A Classic Study in Destructive Hauntings by Colin Wilson. And it is so good. It's got just a ton of really interesting, spooky, weird stories in it. But so in his book, he said that one of the characteristics is that there's often a puddle of water on the floor that came from nowhere.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, I hadn't either. And that's pretty specific. I mean, knockings in the walls can be a lot of spirits, but a puddle of water on the floor, that takes a lot of energy to manifest something like that. He also talked about in this book that they can start little fires like spontaneously, which is pretty terrifying.
All right, two more real quick ones here. Tina from Facebook says, I don't understand how when we die we can sometimes get lost. What does that mean when they say to go to the light? Is it really that different when we die?
Well, that is a very good question.
That's pretty deep.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I'll give you my best shot, Tina, at an answer at that. I think that it's possible. I think that as far as I've heard, stories and experiences I've heard, the most common reasons for a spirit remaining earthbound and not crossing over are because they have fear about the life that they led and what they're going to find, or they have fear or guilt, or they are very tied to something in the physical world, like someone leaving a young child behind that they are extremely concerned about, someone having unfinished business, such as Leon having this stuff buried in the dirt room that his family didn't know about, that he wanted them to have, or somebody with unfinished business, such as a victim of a crime that wants justice done and is trying to get someone to, take care of it. That was sort of the premise of the movie Ghost, right?
Yeah. And, when she says, I don't understand when we die how we can sometimes get lost, that to me, that makes me think, like, okay, if you're driving down the road and let's just say a semi hits you, boom, you're dead, okay?
Yeah.
You see the semi coming, oh my God, this is probably going to be it. Okay, here's a way I would explain it to Tina. Excuse me. When you're going to bed, you know that you're going to bed. But at that moment of falling asleep, you're in a dream. You're not aware that, okay, guess what? I was just going to bed, and now I'm in this dream. It's like a transition. You know what I mean? It's kind of like transitioning into the other world. That's just my 2 cents. Last one, Amber from Erie, PA, says, could ghosts be images in time that sometimes overlap our current time? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I love that question. I love the way it's phrased. Actually, there's so much stuff that we haven't covered, but one of the spirits that I saw here I've seen everything from black blobs that, not shadow people because they weren't that well defined, but just like a big, dark, inky blob that was standing, well, 2 different times, but once standing in a doorway. It was about 5 feet tall, and when I turned and looked at it straight on, because I'm like, what is that? It like whooshed from one doorway into another doorway and out the front hall. And it seemed to be sentient. It seemed to be aware and able to react to me in real time. And also, to the other extreme, I have seen in this house what I thought was a spirit. But when I woke up, because my feet were so cold that I literally was afraid. Like, I thought I was dying. I could not believe that part of my body could be this cold. And I sat up. And when I sat up to see if, like, the covers had fallen off, not that would explain the kind of weird coldness that I was feeling, there was a spirit sitting at the foot of my bed. It was a woman from the 1940s.
Just you saying that.
Well,
how are you still in that house?
Because there's so many good experiences, too. Plus, I just love the house. And I feel I'm learning, and I'm getting better and more confident at, I consider myself like a steward, a caretaker of this house. You asked if I thought I was meant to get this house. I am, and it's been a lot of learning experiences, a lot of positive things, too. But anyway, so this woman sitting at the foot of my bed was the only spirit in this house that didn't seem like she was animated. It seemed like I was looking at an image, like a moment from her life that was so emotional that it got stuck somehow. And her emotion was just this incredible sadness. It was palpable. It was heartbreaking. I don't know what really had happened to her in her life. My impression was that she'd lost a son, like her son had died. But anyway, and that was, I truly believe in her case, that was just an image.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, Annie.
Another spirit.
I'm 6'2", 221, and if I woke up and seen something like that, I think I'd be running out like a schoolgirl, screaming. I'm being honest with you. But before we end the show, I want to, everybody wants to know where they could get this material, because we haven't even scratched the surface of what you've experienced. Where do they get your stuff at? I know you got multiple books. Where do they check you out at?
They can go to my website, which is anniewilder.com, and I've got book excerpts and links to buy the books at different places, and I've got EVPs that were recorded at my house, and some radio interviews and TV shows, and some articles that I wrote. I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, anniewilder.com. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter, and there are links to my Facebook and Twitter pages. And then, so I have the book of House of Spirits and Whispers is my book about my house, and Spirits Out of Time is my book of true family ghost stories. And then this August, I have a new book coming out called Trucker Ghost Stories.
August, another connection. I'm born in August.
Oh, what's your day? I was going to ask you what your birth date was.
August 6th, 79.
Okay, so you're a Leo, right?
I'm a Leo, yes.
Do you know your rising sign or your moon sign?
You know what? I'm not too astrological suave there.
Well, if you're interested in finding out a little more, I will help you and hook you up with a website where you can get a bunch of free information. But when you were talking about loving the wind, because I love the wind, I'm like so inspired by wind. And
are you a Leo?
Exhilarated by it. I'm not a Leo. I'm a Libra, and that's an air sign. And my rising sign is Aquarius, and that's an air sign. And one of the books that I worked on when I was working at Llewellyn was a book that talked about looking at your, in an astrological chart, like Leo, I believe, is a fire sign, and looking at all of the elements that are in your chart, like what your main elements that are part of your energetic makeup. And I have a lot of air signs in my chart. And so that's like like I love the wind, and in my house I have all these things that are sort of like whirligigs and, you know, mobiles and little airplanes hanging from strings, like things that relate to the wind or demonstrate that the wind is there, or, you know, respond to a breeze.
The wind chimes.
It's very fun to...
Nothing like wind chimes.
What did you say?
The wind chimes, the little ding ding
ding.
Oh, that's my favorite sound.
Yeah. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to hook you up with this website.
Absolutely.
I want you to say it in case other people care, but it's called AstroDienst, because it's a German website, AstroDienst.com.
Okay. If you could mail that to Chrissy, I'll go ahead and put that on the website as well. And I'm going to link your, you're already linked up, the Annie Wilder. That's ANNIEWILDER for anybody out there that has spelling issues like myself sometimes.
No, it's always good.
You figured I'd put it out there. But I'll tell you what, Annie, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to get this all set up, and I'm going to, you know, we're going to have to get you back on here. There's just too much to cover.
I would love to come back on, and I'm serious. If you guys make it up to Minnesota, let me know, and you can spend the night.
I would definitely look forward to that. We'll have to videotape it.
Okay, cool.
All right, I will talk to you later, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Shawn.
All right, thanks. Good night.
Good night.
I'll take a ride on a good feeling, knowing it'll see me through. Like a drive down a dusty highway after the sun's gone down, chasing shadows into the new day, leaving this lonely town. I'm gonna rock, ride, nothing to hide, let the headlights guide me. I'm gonna roll right into the night, take the midnight highway. Midnight highway. I knew a girl, now she's a woman. We used to walk the road at night, dream about